Storm semua terus, kijk dan. Kijk dan. Kijk dan.
Just before dawn on January 9th, 2026, the atmosphere over the North Atlantic took a sudden and dangerous turn. What looked like a strong but manageable winter system didn't slowly build. It detonated. Fueled by unusually warm ocean waters, the storm rapidly intensified as it charged toward the English Channel. There was no long lead-up, no extended warning window. Within hours, the system exploded into a high-impact windstorm that would later be named Storm Goretti. It slammed into northwestern France with little notice, then continued accelerating toward the United Kingdom. Communities still recovering from earlier winter weather were suddenly facing a far more violent threat. Wind speeds surged faster than forecast models had predicted. Coastal monitoring stations began recording extreme gusts one after another, a clear sign the storm was no longer behaving like a typical winter system. Trees began to snap. Power networks failed. Structures designed to withstand severe winds were pushed past their limits. This wasn't a storm that unfolded over a day. It unfolded over minutes. By the time the scale of the danger became clear, Goretti was already tearing across Western Europe, driving a concentrated wall of destructive wind through one of the most densely populated regions on the continent. What started as a forecast quickly turned into an emergency in motion. Storm Goretti hit France with relentless force, slamming into the northwest and immediately overwhelming coastal areas. Normandy and Brittany were the first to take the impact, and they were hit at the storm's most violent stage. Along exposed coastlines, wind gusts blasted past 125 miles per hour, reaching levels more often seen in powerful hurricanes. Damage came in rapid waves. Entire lines of trees collapsed onto roads and homes. Roof sections were ripped free and hurled across neighborhoods. Debris filled the air as the storm pushed inland, leaving little time to react. What made Goretti especially dangerous wasn't just its strength. It was how fast everything happened. Power infrastructure failed almost all at once as transmission lines snapped under the force of the wind. Within hours, emergency dispatch centers were overwhelmed with calls. Reports of damaged buildings, blocked roads, and debris flying through streets that had suddenly become danger zones. As daylight arrived, the scale of the damage was impossible to ignore. Hundreds of thousands of homes across France were without electricity, with the worst outages concentrated in Normandy. Entire towns went dark. Heating systems shut down. Communication networks were stretched to their limits. Utility crews struggled to respond as fallen trees and debris clogged roads, slowing access to damaged substations and power lines. Transportation came to a standstill. Coastal highways were closed. Rural routes became impassable. Even emergency vehicles faced delays navigating through wreckage and fallen infrastructure. This was no longer just severe weather. France was facing a large-scale wind disaster, and Storm Goretti was still moving. The storm struck at the worst possible time. Just after midnight, while most people were asleep, Goretti rapidly intensified as it swept across northern France. By the time the clock passed 1 a.m., the system had reached peak strength, slamming both coastal cities and inland towns with non-stop, violent winds. Entire communities were exposed while residents had little chance to react. Buildings groaned under the pressure. Walls vibrated. Roof panels lifted, flexed, and slammed back into place. Across neighborhoods, the wind sounded like a constant explosion, drowning out every other sound. Many people woke suddenly, not to sirens or alerts, but to the terrifying feeling that their homes were being torn apart. Emergency networks were pushed to their limits. Calls flooded in reporting fallen trees, live power lines on the ground, shattered roofs, and roads completely blocked. Firefighters and rescue crews were forced to operate in near-zero visibility, battling flying debris and hurricane-force gusts just to reach those in need. For hours, response teams fought the storm itself, knowing every minute mattered, and the wind wasn't done yet. Power grids failed in waves. Large parts of Normandy and Brittany went dark within minutes, cutting off heat, lights, and communication for tens of thousands of families in the middle of the night. As morning approached, one thing became painfully clear. This was no ordinary storm. It was a nighttime assault that left entire regions shaken, isolated, and unsure of what would come next. As Storm Goretti roared overhead, a second disaster was unfolding along the coast, one rising straight out of the sea. Hurricane-force winds whipped the English Channel into a violent, churning mass. Offshore sensors detected waves climbing toward 50 feet, rolling toward northern France like moving walls of water. Each surge slammed into the coastline with relentless force, overwhelming seawalls and smashing through defenses built for far calmer storms. Harbors and waterfront neighborhoods were hit first. Water spilled over docks and poured into coastal streets, turning roads into rivers in minutes. In low-lying areas, seawater pushed into homes and businesses, forcing residents to scramble for safety as emergency alerts spread. Some families had only moments to move belongings upstairs or get out before water rushed inside. Ports and fishing marinas took heavy damage. Boats tore free from their moorings, slamming into piers or being dragged ashore by the surge. Entire harbor systems were shut down as officials declared conditions too dangerous for any vessel to operate. Ferries stopped running. Cargo ships diverted. Fishing fleets were grounded. For communities along the channel, the storm came from two directions at once. From the sky above and from the ocean below. The coastline became one of the most dangerous places in Europe. And as Goretti pushed relentlessly inland, it showed no sign of weakening. By the time the storm reached deeper into France, it had lost none of its fury. Even the capital was pulled into its core. In Paris, winds tore through the city with rare intensity, with gusts approaching 95 miles per hour recorded high above the skyline. Far from the coast, the air itself became a threat. Loose debris turned into projectiles. Trees bent and snapped. Historic streets echoed with the sound of wind hammering buildings not designed for this kind of force. This was no longer a coastal crisis. Storm Goretti had become a nationwide emergency, fast, violent, and still unfolding. What is usually a dense, tightly controlled urban environment was suddenly exposed to violent, unpredictable forces. Across the metro area, the storm began tearing the city apart. Rooftop panels, scaffolding, traffic signs, and loose construction materials were ripped free and hurled through the air. Trees collapsed onto streets, crushing cars and snapping power lines in seconds. In some neighborhoods, fallen debris blocked entire streets, cutting off whole blocks and trapping residents inside. Movement became impossible. Authorities scrambled to contain the damage. Major roads were shut down as emergency crews worked under extreme conditions to clear wreckage and prevent further injuries. Firefighters rushed from call to call, cutting through fallen trees, stabilizing unsafe buildings, and rescuing people trapped inside damaged homes. All of it happened while the wind continued to roar. For a city built to handle heat waves, flooding, and routine winter storms, this was different. Outside, streets looked less like a European capital and more like a disaster zone. A stark reminder that when a storm reaches this level, no place is truly safe. But Storm Goretti didn't just bring violent weather. It began dismantling the systems that keep modern life running. Across northern France, the power grid started failing in sequence. High-voltage transmission lines collapsed as trees were ripped from the ground and thrown into power corridors. Entire communities in Normandy and Brittany lost electricity within minutes. Hospitals switched to backup generators. Cell towers flickered. Water pumps and heating systems struggled to stay online as power vanished from hundreds of thousands of homes. Across the English Channel, the United Kingdom was hit by the same destructive wave. In the southwest, the Midlands, and parts of Wales, neighborhoods lost power as winds slammed into substations and overhead lines. Repair crews were forced to stand down, unable to work while gusts were strong enough to knock people off their feet. Many outages lasted through the night, leaving families without heat or light in the middle of a winter storm. Transportation failed next. Highways became impassable as massive trees fell across lanes, crushing vehicles and blocking entire routes. Rail services were suspended. Air travel faced delays and cancellations as safety conditions collapsed. What Storm Goretti revealed was simple and unsettling. When wind reaches this level, cities don't just slow down. They unravel piece by piece until even the basics become uncertain. In some regions, roads were ripped apart into isolated pockets, cutting entire towns off from emergency assistance. Emergency services were pushed to the edge. Dispatch centers were overwhelmed with calls, reports of collapsing roofs, blocked streets, and people trapped inside darkened homes. This was no longer just severe weather. It was a simultaneous breakdown of the systems people rely on, unfolding in two countries at the same time. Storm Goretti did not weaken. After leaving France, it accelerated. As the system crossed the English Channel, it reorganized and slammed directly into the southwest of the United Kingdom, one of the most exposed coastlines in the country. Cornwall, Devon, and parts of Wales were hit first, taking the full force of winds powerful enough to rival a tropical cyclone. At St. Mary's Airport in the Isles of Scilly, instruments recorded a 99 miles per hour gust, the strongest ever measured at that location. Along the coast, buildings shuddered. Roofs were torn apart. Trees folded under the relentless pressure of the wind. Power lines failed one after another, plunging entire communities into darkness. The UK Met Office issued a rare red weather warning, signaling a direct threat to life. Authorities moved fast. Schools were closed. Rail services in Cornwall and Devon were suspended. Major roads were shut down as debris and fallen trees made travel impossible. In many towns, residents were told to stay indoors because stepping outside had become dangerous. Flying metal, shattered branches, and airborne roofing turned streets into active hazard zones. For much of the Southwest, this was not just another winter storm. It was a sudden, violent assault that transformed routine weather into a national emergency within hours. And Storm Goretti wasn't finished. It didn't just batter the United Kingdom, it crippled the country's ability to move. Violent winds tore through critical rail corridors in the southwest. In Cornwall and Devon, rail lines were among the first systems to fail as trees crashed onto tracks, signaling the beginning of a widespread transportation shutdown. Signals went dark. Entire rail lines were shut down, leaving thousands of passengers stranded with no way in or out of coastal communities. What had been routine morning travel turned into isolation within hours. Air travel quickly followed. At Birmingham Airport, operations were halted overnight as snow, ice, and powerful crosswinds made runways too dangerous for takeoffs or landings. Across the UK, aircraft were forced to divert, circle, or cancel flights as pilots encountered unstable air and rapidly shifting wind fields that pushed well beyond safety limits. On the ground, highways became just as unreliable. Gusts hurled debris across lanes. Flooded low points and fallen trees cut off major routes. Some drivers were turned back by police, while others found themselves trapped between closures with no clear way out. This was not a slow disruption. It was sudden paralysis. A country built on constant movement was brought to a standstill by a single storm system. Storm Goretti didn't just arrive, it took control. Long before the full extent of the damage could be counted, Storm Goretti was already reshaping daily life for millions across France and the United Kingdom. Power grids failed in waves. Entire neighborhoods went dark without warning. Heating systems shut down. Cell phones drained as people tried desperately to stay connected while towers flickered on emergency power. In many places, the only light came from candles inside homes and the flashing blue lights of emergency vehicles outside. The danger wasn't confined to screens or statistics. It was right outside people's doors. Cars were crushed beneath fallen trees. Roof panels were ripped free and slammed into streets. Power lines lay tangled across roads. Even brief trips outdoors became dangerous, as every gust carried the threat of flying debris or collapsing structures. Some families fled their homes, seeking shelter wherever space was available. Others stayed inside, huddled in hallways or stairwells as the wind shook walls and rattled windows through the night. Every sound felt like a warning. Flooded streets and debris-choked roads slowed emergency crews, making it difficult to reach the hardest-hit areas. Even where the wind had eased, movement remained dangerous. The threats were no longer only in the sky. Weakened trees could fall without warning. Roofs that survived the storm were left loose and unstable. Standing seawater and saturated ground created serious collapse risks and concealed electrical hazards. One broken power line, one shifting structure, or one flooded street could turn deadly in an instant. That is why officials continued urging residents to stay indoors, avoid unnecessary travel, and treat all damaged areas as unsafe. The storm's peak had passed, but its impact was still spreading. Goretti didn't end when the wind slowed. It entered its most dangerous phase, the aftermath. Extreme weather moves fast, and being informed can make all the difference. This channel brings you on-the-ground coverage of the world's most dangerous storms, from destructive wind events and towering waves to blackouts, transportation shutdowns, and critical infrastructure failures. We cut through the noise to show what's really happening, where it's happening, and why it matters. If you found the analysis in this video valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Please share this video with your friends and family. And if this report helped you understand the situation, hit the like button. It helps this information reach more people who need to see it. Thank you for watching.